Great. Hi, welcome back. Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to Things You Ought to Know podcast. I am your co-host, Kelby Finati.
And I'm your other co-host, Erica Arnautovich.
Today, we're going to dive in with another autism mom. Her name is Kara. We're excited to kind of get to know her a little bit more. She's going to talk to us about advocacy, a little bit about homeschooling, and just her journey. So that'll come in a little bit. But before we dive into and get to know Kara a little bit more, I'd like to hear how your week was. I know you had some birthdays that came through this week for you.
Yes. So my husband's birthday is August 9th. Luca's birthday is August 10th. Yes, that was purposeful. I was not going to go into labor on August 9th. Even though my husband thought it would be a cool idea to share a birthday, I was like, no, not going to do that.
Happy birthday, late belated birthday, Yanni and Luca.
Thank you. Yeah, they both had great days. We had some water problems, but now is resolved thanks to my husband and my brother-in-law. They definitely, put a lot of sweat and time into our main water pipe leak that we had. But we now have running water again. So, I am very happy. I can wash my dishes and shower. It may not look like it right now if you're viewing this, but I have showered.
I don't tell you.
I was gonna say, I smell good. So it was really good. On my husband's birthday, we kind of have a family tradition of having a cake fight. So, we've done this for a few years now, and my youngest daughter thinks it is great. And so she kind of was like nudging my niece to do it. My oldest niece, who is 17 now, did a little like smear of icing on my oldest daughter's nose. And my oldest daughter went diabolical. And from there, like smashed a whole piece of cake into her face. From there, our entire first floor was trashed with chocolate cake. So we spent the rest of the evening, my entire family, my nieces and my sister-in-law and everybody included, we, spent cleaning up cake. But it was a fun 10 minutes of cake fight.
Yeah, I know the listeners can't see, we're in your home right now. They can't see the walls or the white curtains, but they did great at not getting it on the walls or the curtains or anything. So you've trained them well over the years.
Yes.
Doing this.
Yes, we know the rules now that you're not to go anywhere near the white couch or the white curtains. But everything else is pretty much fair game. If it can be cleaned, it is fair game. And so it was everywhere. I was just, as you were walking in the house, I was finding like cake on a piece of my wall so that I cleaned off. But so we did that, and Luca turned 4, and I wanted to mention this because I think, and I don't know, maybe it's just me. I think probably a lot of autism moms feel this way though as our kids get older. I think all parents get nostalgic with especially their babies, birthdays as they're getting older, and Luca is my youngest. But there's happiness, and I'm so proud of him, and I love him, of course, around his birthday. But there's some sadness for me around his birthday. I really didn't experience that until last year on his 3rd birthday, because everybody had always, and I had just kind of plugged in my brain, if he's not talking by 3, there's that chance starts to kind of decrease of having a lot of functional language, which is not the case, I've since learned. But, now that we turned 4, it's not so much toddler anymore. And this birthday was hard for me.
It seems a little bit more finite for you. Yeah, I've experienced that. And I think I can mimic that probably every birthday when it rolls around. It just seems a little bit more like, but also there comes acceptance with that. Have you experienced that?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely think now I've just kind of accepted, like we got his AAC device in just a couple days before his birthday, and we're going to start utilizing that this Friday. His speech therapist is going to come in, his ABA, his BCBA is going to come and get trained on it as well. So we're all on the same page. So I think there is some acceptance in, like he's making his gains and he is who he is, and this is just, it's more solidified, he is who he is. And he's great, you know, and he's perfect and he's exactly who he's supposed to be. But yeah, I wanted to touch on that because, like, as a mom, like, I feel guilty for feeling not just nostalgically kind of sad my baby's growing up, but sad, and that gap between him and his age equivalent peers is growing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he's not 2 and I can blame, you know, he's just having a 2-year-old toddler meltdown anymore. Like, I feel like I'm starting to kind of enter that era of, we're gonna get the stares more. Like, I can't, he's not gonna, you know, we're not there quite yet, but I feel like we're getting to the point where people are gonna start looking, you know, if he screams in Target or something, you know. And so that is just kind of what I feel like I'm like re-bracing myself for. But he had a great birthday.
Good.
He was happy. His ABA therapist brought him cupcakes. Luca loves balloons and likes to watch them drop. So, I mean, when I tell you the floor was full of balloons, like, they must have been blowing up balloons for hours. They, you know, just are so sweet and loving and kind to him. And he had the best day there. He swam, and, you know, we went to the park. He had a multitude of yogurts that day and cupcakes, which he never gets. So
there's no limit on your birthday. That's our rule, at least.
Yeah, when he went to the fridge and wanted a yogurt, I didn't even attempt to say no. I was just like, all right. So I think we had 4 yogurts, we had cupcakes, we had all the things that day. So yeah, he was in heaven, not only with activities, but with food, which is also heaven for him in general. But
I'm curious, do you, around the birthday, I've had to learn, because my family is very much birthday party families, and I'm not talking about like have the family over for a birthday party. I'm talking like full blown, I mean,
like bounce houses in the
the
backyard.
whole shebang. It looks like a production is going on in the backyard. And I mean, we spend days, weeks prepping for them, days setting up for them. It is a whole gamut. And I got kind of wrapped into that a little bit in Porter's earlier ages. Granted, he was a COVID toddler, so his first and second birthday and was not like that, but his third was like that. And then his fourth came, and especially this past birthday on the 5th. And why I said there's a little bit more acceptance to you earlier was because I had learned to not set that expectation on him. He's not a kid that wants a ton of family around. He doesn't have many friends. That's just how that's the autism part for him. And he thrives better when it's just us in his happy place, or we're doing some type of experience. So last year, for his 5th birthday, we did Great Wolf Lodge, and it was just us. And that was like the most gratifying thing, was to no longer, especially on holidays, Christmas, things like that, to not set the expectation for him to be like his neurotypical peers. It's okay, what is best for my child on his birthday? What is going to make him happy? You with Luca and the balloons, or the cupcake thing, the throwing. You didn't have 100 people over here where you're stressed. He's not able to thrive to take off of your nervous system because you're already panicking. I was that for him with a few of his birthdays. There's some guilt there because I tried to force something on him that wasn't meant for him. But I also learned from that and pivoted. And
right. And maybe he would have loved it, and you wouldn't know that if you hadn't tried.
Right. And it's like when people sing happy birthday, that only overstimulates him.
Yeah.
It's not something that he likes.
Yes.
But now opening up presents, he loves to tear open wrapping paper and find a new gift for himself. So we do things like that. Like, we make sure the presents are still part of it, but we modify, you know, the people, the sound, all of that experience. So that's something I've learned in just the 5 years of birthdays so far. And then I wanted to touch on too, you had mentioned kind of like there's some sadness there with that kind of what I said, like being a little bit more finite in who he is and uniquely him. I'm experiencing that right now because Parker, my almost 1 year old, he's 10 months old, he's starting to talk and he's experiencing words. I am going to cry because he is saying mama, and that's something that I've never heard from Porter. But I find myself, there's some beauty in that because, like, if Parker is on the floor playing, and I'm trying to do some interactive like speech things with him, it fits for my 5 year old, and that not a lot of people experience that dynamic.
Yeah.
Where I'm saying, Parker, can you say mama? Can you say dada? And then I'm turning to my 5 year old and I'm saying the same thing. And it's actually like, I think it's helping him. I think it's helping
yeah.
Porter because he's starting to see like, it's that cause and effect of speech. Like I'm asking Parker to say something and he is saying it back.
Yeah.
And I want to say one of the coolest things that ever happened the other day was Porter said he's starting to mouth ma ma, and it's not coming out as like a sound, it's a whisper, it's a I don't know if you can hear ASMR, it's
Yeah.
but he is trying it, and I think it's because he's learning what that looks like from brother, and now what he's able to do. And I think it's probably just getting older, therapies are working, and so
it's not being asked of him necessarily all the time, because they get like that pathological demand avoidance almost, like even if they don't are diagnosed with that, like you think about somebody constantly coming up to you and be like question or say this, do this, like a demand is being placed.
I did not even think of
it's
that
not being placed on him.
That classic pathological demand avoidance. Yeah, he's classic for that.
You'll hear him babbling all away. They'll be saying dad, 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 and you say dad, dad, and they're like,
exactly.
Who are you talking to?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that I didn't even think about that it takes the demand off of him.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
But he's still hearing it modeled.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't think about that.
I think that's so cool.
It is. It's cool. It's been very rewarding to see their relationship, trying to to cultivate that. I've implemented Sunday night dinners. Anytime we put our dining room table back up, it was a playroom. And I just said, I think we need to convert this back into a dining room table. We need to sit around the table as a family. We need to have the brothers sit beside each other and get used to being in close quarters together. And that's starting to help them with the relationship. So I'm trying, it's just like, what they say, it's like you throw the kitchen sink at it and whatever sticks, and you take that and you run with it.
Yep.
And I'm trying to just throw the kitchen sink at this life,
Yeah.
And trying to figure out what sticks for both of them, because it's always been only Porter, and now, especially now that Parker is more mobile, I have to figure out what's working for both of them.
Yeah.
And that's been an interesting
dynamic,
exhausting dynamic at times, but rewarding in its same sense.
Yeah. I think that's always, like we've talked about it before, I think that's always the thing with our family's dynamics that we have, where we have a child with autism that is not speaking, and we both have another child who is, appearing neurotypical. Mm-hmm. And so, those types of things are so challenging, but at the same time, we get to see the beauty in the differences. And that is really, really a sweet, cool thing. Mm-hmm. That, I think at times we can all take for granted, but I think we see it and don't take it for granted more than we take it for granted.
Absolutely.
At this point in our journeys.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
One other thing to touch on just about my week that was different is we went to the dentist.
How did it go?
And that can be very scary for a lot of parents.
Yes.
And I know a lot of parents probably avoid that because it's not necessarily where you see that they're sick or you see that or they're going to see you as the pediatrician. Thankfully, not anything that we tried to do, but at 2 years old, Porter fell outside going up the stairs and chipped his front tooth. So his first experience at the dentist was very early at 2 years old. And then we've just kept up with cleanings every 6 months since then. They're not, at the beginning, they weren't the easiest things to go to. But I had such Michael took him to his last 6-month appointment, and it was a new dentist here in our area. And I'd done some research on, local Facebook moms groups. They're amazing. They give you the real deal there. And so they recommended this dentist. We went. My husband said it was a great experience. He's a hard critic to please.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, our husbands are similar in that way.
it was a great experience for him and for Porter. And then this time around, he had a meeting. So then I decided I was just going to take him, and I had to take him with what I thought at the time was both the kids, but Michael was able to let Parker sleep while I went with Porter. And so that was really cool too, because I got that one-on-one time with Porter. I very rarely get that, because anybody that knows me knows that Parker is a barnacle baby.
Yes.
He is attached to me. And so going into the dentist was an experience, because we had to sit in the waiting room trying to figure out what waiting looked like. He did really good. We just played. There was a few other kiddos and 2 other moms in the waiting area, and we got the stares. And at first I was sitting there and I wanted to be like, what you looking at, lady?
Yep.
Like, hey, I get it if the kid's staring, but what the heck are your eyes locked on?
Right.
Because my child is, stimming, he's vocally stimming. Like, okay, it's one thing to acknowledge that, but she was just straight staring.
Mm-hmm.
And if I would have been Mama Bear in that moment and had been like, your eyes stuck.
Yeah.
What's happening here?
Yeah.
I would have lost the moment to teach her, because this is what happened. I just was like, okay, calm myself. Like, don't activate Mama Bear yet. And so I focused on Porter. I just redirected my focus on him, and we just played. And if he was stimming, I was stimming with him. We were just having a ball in that waiting room. And then one of the moms, not the one that was staring, the other mom with her 2 kids there, she just glanced over and gave me a smile, like that kind of like mom smile that we give each other. And she was like, is he nonverbal? And I've never actually had like a stranger out in the wild. I say out in the wild, like I've never had a stranger out in the wild just come out and ask me that.
Yeah.
And I was taken back by it, but I also like respected the heck out of her for just like asking the question.
Well, and she obviously knew he had autism. She
Yeah.
wasn't like naive to what is the diagnosis.
Right.
Yeah.
And so she was like, is he nonverbal? And I was like, yeah, he is. And I get so proud in those moments just to tell people who he is.
Yeah.
And to have a moment of advocacy there for him. And I was like, yeah, he does. And actually, like he speaks through his AAC device. I showed her that. One of her kids was interested in looking at it, so I showed them how he communicates on it. And so it became a moment of like where we were able to just kind of level. And the other mom who had the stuck eyes, her eyes became unstuck, and she started to interact with me in the conversation. And it was like, she has a cousin who has autism. They are trying to get services right now. So I say all that to say, like, I very quickly wanted to jump into Mama Bear mode. But for anybody who has that experience, maybe try to redirect it and change your perspective into it being a teaching moment rather than a I'm gonna read you up and down moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Which is not easy all the time.
no, it's
Some
not.
days it's easier than others,
It's
but
not. But that
That's
was
amazing.
pretty cool, because then not only did I get to have that moment with Porter, and he got to see what it's like to not only like to advocate for himself and for me to advocate for him, but we got to teach 5-6 people in that moment about autism and about him and who he is.
yeah.
So, and then just to say, the dentist was amazing. He
He
did
did
great. He loved the suction and the water pressure to the point where the hygienist was like, stop doing the water into his mouth, because that was the new thing. We were trying out the new devices. And so we did and she would stop doing the waters, and he would take her
Grab
hand and touch and push her thumb down on the button to where the water could go back in his mouth. And I was like, there he goes. That's my kid. He's going to get what he wants. He finds a way to communicate. And she was just eating him alive. She loved that he was doing that.
I love it. He's like, I don't care how high your water bill is going to be this month.
Yeah.
I need more.
Give me the water.
It is very satisfying to
And then
me.
he would stick that suction, once the water would come in, he would let it stick to his tongue. And I think he liked that.
that sensory feeling.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so cute.
It was
I
fun.
love it. I love that he was happy there though.
Me too. Me
That's
too.
great.
As it can go either way.
Yes. Yes. But he
Thankfully,
very
that day
much
went
was
well.
not upset with the dentist.
No.
That's great. That gives me some hope of looking forward because
Yeah.
we have an excellent dentist. Love her to pieces. We get very neuro affirming care at our dentist office. But yeah, Luca has not enjoyed brushing teeth. He likes to put things in his mouth, but he likes to do it, but he doesn't want to put a toothbrush in his mouth.
Yeah. It took us a long time to do that with Porter.
Yeah.
A long time. But we stayed persistent.
Yeah.
Consistency was the key for our kiddos. So
yeah. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
So both of us had good weeks
we
overall.
did.
Yeah.
We did. Yeah.
I'm gonna just knock on wood because the last time I was a little too
Overzealous
about how great my week was. I've had water problems and everything since. So
yeah, I'll knock for you too.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, just do all the knocking. Everybody cross your fingers and toes for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was overall a good week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go ahead and dive in to get to know Kara. Okay, so we are excited to have Kara today. Kara and us, we connected over social media, and she has recently started her advocacy journey for her daughter. So we are going to kind of dive into what that journey looks like for her. Before we get started, I am just going to give everybody a little bit of insight into who she is. So Kara is an autism mom who is formerly an EMT and medical scribe. She lives in South Georgia with her husband of 9 years and her 2 daughters. Her daughter S was diagnosed with level 1 autism in May of this year, which sparked her journey of advocacy, and now she is starting her homeschooling journey. So welcome, Kara. We're excited to dive in and get to know you a little bit more and connect as just fellow autism moms all together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Trying to live that journey.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, like, previously we were just kind of chatting for a minute, and you mentioned that you live in a rural area, which is very similar to our area. You live right outside of Albany, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And we live right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, which is kind of the hub. And we're
Mhm.
still considered like the greater Charlotte area,
Mhm.
but we're in York County, South Carolina. So
Okay.
a lot of our services, we really can relate to that rural feeling,
Yes.
even though we have a big city miles, just a few miles from us. It definitely can make it more challenging to get services. So
Yep.
tell us a little bit though about your journey first let's start with diagnosis and then we'll start with services.
So we were diagnosed in May, and that was on after a 6-month waiting list to our psychologist. And actually, where we live at, the office that we wanted to go to it was like 45 minutes away ish. And thankfully, we only had to go for like one day, but we had, virtual first meeting consultation type thing. And so that was a little bit challenging, but we were really glad to have gone to the place that we went to. It's Mosaic in Thomasville, Georgia, and it was fantastic. Everybody was super nice, and I was willing to go there because I had several people that talked about, oh, this place is really nice. They're really they're very helpful. And the doctor that we saw was really great. And so at the end of I was literally just talking about this the other day with another lady that I met in the hair salon. And she's like, it's all really great that they had prescribed all of these services, but here's the problem. There's nowhere to fulfill those services. Or if there is a service, they're like on a 6-month wait. So that's what we're currently doing. We were prescribed to go to ABA therapy, occupational therapy, and of course speech therapy. And I knew that she had a speech delay prior to the diagnosis. And this just like goes to show you how rural and how crazy this whole thing is. So I knew she had a speech delay. And I went to our local hospital trying to get speech therapy. And I literally have been on the waiting list for a year now. And I was just like, okay, all right, so I'm just going to go back to the basics. Let's just post it on social media. So I went on Facebook and I'm like, is there anyone that'll do pediatric speech therapy? And thank God that a lady contacted me that I knew. And she's like, hey, reach out to this lady, see if she's available. I spoke to her, and we instantly connected. Instantly connected. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is who I'm supposed to be with. And we talked for a really long time. She gave me a lot of encouragement. And she's a small business owner. She has a speech therapy, business. She comes to our house, and she does DIR floor time. And that was something that I never heard of before. And she kind of explained it to me, and it was fantastic. The approach that she did has been phenomenal. And so we've seen such gains since the speech therapy that's outside of just the diagnosis.
Real quick, Kara, we are suckers for in the autism world for acronyms. Do you know what DIR stands for? If not, we can Google it really quick. I just want to make sure our
Oh,
listeners are in the loop too.
oh gosh, I can't remember.
That's okay. I can
Yeah.
Google real quick. I
Okay.
love Google. This is why we
She
have
said DIR floor.
floor.
Floor time. I can't remember.
Direct floor.
But the approach is from you
ABM.
start from the bottom and then go up.
Oh, it's just floor. Okay, it's basically it just says floor time. So instead of doing like table, like where they sit across from each other, I'm imagining they're all around moving in the room. That's what my friend experience is with speech therapy. So, so that's awesome to know that they do that with her too. Sorry to cut you off. I was just curious about what that stands for.
Yeah, it's funny because I was like, oh, I don't even know what DIR really stands for. Obviously, you're starting from the floor and then going up, instead of just from a top-down approach. Anyhow, she was phenomenal and gave me such encouragement and such, she empowered me so much. We've had such big gains from our speech therapist. Yeah, that's pretty much it as far as we've already done. We, like I said, we're still on our waiting list on ABA therapy and occupational therapy. We just got approved for Medicare. I'm sorry, Medicaid. And, yeah, that was really cool.
We know how tough that can be. I'm going through the process right now for South Carolina. It's a lot of stuff you have to do.
It's a bear.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, honestly, I will say this, out of all the things, that was probably my easiest thing that I did. So I don't know. Yeah, I filled out the paperwork and I was like, here you go. And then they're like, okay, we'll email you. And then they emailed me and then they sent me the card and I was like, okay.
Very good.
Georgia's up on it more than South Carolina is, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. We're a tough state sometimes to get things like this accomplished. How old is your daughter?
So she's 4. She just turned 4 in May.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was so funny that she got diagnosed in May because that is Autism Awareness. And I was like, what a coincidence.
Really, it is. And that's like you're flooded with resources during that month too, especially just more so online, not locally. But I'm curious because when we previously spoke, you had said that that you had some issues really where you had to advocate to get that diagnosis.
Yes.
Can you walk us through what that experience was like for you and how you kind of ignited that advocacy within you?
Yes. So I knew there was something, different when she was 1. She was not walking at 1. And I specifically remember us going to Disney World and her not being able to walk. And she was she furniture cruised, and that was pretty normal. And our pediatrician at the time, and I agreed with him to that point that, it was going to come around and she was going to give up to 18 months. And I remember asking him, okay, should we do physical therapy? And he said, no, we'll give it till 18 months. And I was willing to do that. And then as time went on, I realized she was speech delayed. And I went to him 3 separate times about speech therapy. Didn't ask for, didn't want to go any further for autism or whatever. And I remember the 3 times that I went to him about speech therapy, I was not even considering autism. And he's like, just because you hear, this is like, I quote, just because you hear footsteps in the forest doesn't mean that it's, a bear. It could be a cat, whatever. Um, and I remember him specifically saying that, and I was like, okay, all I'm asking for is for a review, like someone to look at the speech. And he's like, well, does she know 30 words? And I was like, well, she knows 30 words, but she doesn't know how to put those in sentences. Um, and I remember I was like, this is nuts. And then so on the 3rd time, I remember, so how it kind of all, where I knew things were getting bad was last year, May of last year. I remember getting so frustrated. I was like, I thought it was me, as a mom, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm the problem. Like I need to, be more disciplined. I need to be more structured. I need, like you can probably name all the things that you're doing wrong. But I remember going to him that day because I had lost my cool with my daughter. Just for like transparency, it was like really, really bad for me because I remember being very, very frustrated. And I was like, David, my husband, I was like, hey, we've got to go and see about speech therapy. We've got to do something. Something's got to change because we can't keep doing these meltdowns. We can't communicate to her. So I remember going that day, I was like, I'm calling them today and we're getting stuff done today. I'm very, very like a red personality, like we're doing this today. and, and so we go there and I'm like crying. I'm crying in the office. And I'm so not even kidding. We're in the office and she was stimming, which I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know she was spinning around. She was stimming. And we had already been through like a really hectic day. My daughter also had another appointment that day. And she was in and out of offices, which, as you know, transitioning is really, really hard from going from one place back into the car. Da da da. Anyway, she's stimming in the office, and I was like, she's literally stimming right there. And he's like, oh, she's just bored. I was like, oh my gosh, I knew at that moment we're done. So he did write the order to do speech therapy. He's like, I don't think you really need it, but you're going to be wasting their time and your time if you go to speech therapy. And I've told all of my speech therapists this, and they're like, that is so far from the truth. So medical gaslighting is a true, very, very true thing. And I think that may be across the board, not necessarily autism. And I know there's a fine line because I did work in healthcare and I saw that, there were a lot of people that it was like one extreme to the next. It's like nothing could be wrong. And then something could be really, really wrong and they totally dismiss you like us. And then, so after that so the speech therapy, evaluation was at our local hospital. I literally hand delivered the order to this office and they're like, oh, we're on a 6-month wait. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. So we just kind of pushed forward and, I actually got in contact with our local school, our BOE, and we got her an IEP, and that was in May, and then in July, at the end of July, we got an IEP. She was able to get speech therapy through the school because there literally was no speech therapist available to take on a new client. So I was like, the next best thing is to put her into school, and she can at least get speech therapy, and she'll also get some socialization. And that it was a temporary band-aid for what we really needed, some intense speech therapy. Loved our teacher, our sped teacher. She was amazing, extremely helpful, loving, exactly what Samantha needed. And so then that kind of rocked on, each day it was like, oh, because we didn't have a diagnosis, so I couldn't say, oh, well, she has autism and she needs this, this, and this, because we had no diagnosis. And so we were also doing dance. I know this is like all over the place, I feel like. So we were still doing dance. She was going 1 day a week, on Mondays, 1 hour, 1 day a week. But with all of that, she couldn't handle it. And so then in January, she ended up getting kicked out of the dance class that she was in. And that was just like one more stacked thing of all the things that we had, that we had basically gotten kicked out of. But the sped teacher, she was fantastic. And she would say, oh, well, Samantha had a really bad day today. We had to put her in the sensory room to try to help calm her down. She was biting, she would hit, those sort of things. And one of the things that I really hate, and I don't know if I feel like a lot of parents in this autism world kind of, maybe they might understand, is that no one sat me down and was like, I think your daughter has autism, or this is how you need to do this, X, Y, and Z. And that was one of the things that I so desperately wanted someone just to hold my hand and say, Kara, something's different. Let's go get it checked out. I had to advocate. I had to say, okay, we got kicked out of X, Y, and Z. Our teacher keeps saying this, this, and this. And so that was just disappointing to me. And I still struggle with that even today. I talk about on my page, I thought that once we got the diagnosis, all of the events that led up to our diagnosis, I was going to be like, I'm vindicated, and all of this resentment and this aggression, would go away, but it didn't. And I'm still struggling with it today.
I want to first.
I have so many questions.
I know. I want
Sorry.
to first, though, as a pediatric nurse practitioner,
Mm-hmm.
I want to sincerely apologize on behalf of the medical community, because I know this, being a provider for the last 6+ years now in pediatrics, I know that we are not educated. There's literally a paragraph in our textbooks.
Yes.
And if you have an old school pediatrician, I can tell you my office, including me, until my son came along, we were barely competent, in my opinion, to manage children with autism. And a lot of offices are still operating that way because they don't have a personal or a personalized experience with it. These are just patients coming through the door.
Right.
And so I can genuinely say that our entire team of providers now at my office are more than competent to handle these kids. And we give very neuro-affirming care.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's a mission and a goal of mine. Something I do on the side is I do trainings for healthcare providers and daycare staff members. The dance studio is something that, I wish, because you're exactly right. Like, our kids deserve to have all of these childhood experiences, and parents, we deserve to be heard when we bring something, to our medical provider. Darn it, we deserve to be heard. Because our mama gut is telling us something's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, no mother, very few. I mean, there are mamas who, yes, have some mental health issues. We know that but that's few and far between.
Right.
99% of the time, if a mama is bringing you something, she does not want this to be the truth. She does not want this to be the case. She is bringing you this because she is desperate for help. And one time, everybody can say something to try to calm a mama's nerves. But if a mom comes to you for a second time, there should never be a third.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So I want to just apologize that that happened and that was a holdup for you and your child. And then one question I did want to ask you, I love that you advocated and got her into the school system in South Carolina. That's called Child Find.
Yeah.
And so we get them in, that's like they get into the school district after they age out of that birth to three program at 3 years
Right.
old, from 3 to 6.
Hmm.
Because kindergarten in South Carolina is not mandatory. They don't have to
Right.
attend school legally until they're 6.
Right.
But what is your birth to 3 program called? And was like, here it's Baby Net. Was that ever offered to you? I mean, it doesn't sound like it was.
No, it was not. And in fact, it's called Babies Can't Wait program. And because of the delay, we were aged out of it. Yeah.
Really?
Again, one of those things that, like you wish that it could just, you don't want to, I think a lot of parents, there's a lot of things that we can't go back on, because if we did, it would be a total detriment to our children that if we went back and was like, okay, you know, um, so looking forward, like, I don't have the time capacity or emotional to like go back to those moments. Um, but there are times when I'm sitting in the bed and I'm like, are you kidding me? So yeah, in the state of Georgia, it's called Babies Can't Wait program, and because of the delay, we couldn't. We were not eligible for it. So yeah, the Board of Education was and getting an IEP was great for her development. She had some gains. They were not obviously as significant as us doing speech therapy at home in our own safe space that we have now. Um, one of the frustrating parts that I had trouble with, and I don't know, I mean, obviously not all schools are the same, not all speech therapists are the same, blah blah blah. All providers are different. So our speech therapist in the school system, I went to her several times and was like, "Hey, I'm just checking to see, where Samantha is in, her language development. What are you seeing? Is there something I can do at home?" And one after multiple times of trying to get a hold of them, or like trying to meet with them or whatever, I got emailed some generic email saying this is what you can do at home, but it was so generic. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, there's nothing I can do with this. I mean, and like, I don't want to judge at all. I'm not judging. I know that they have 5 kids in the same classroom that all have speech delays or some sort of, obviously, an IEP. So I totally don't want to, like, I'm not saying anything bad about it at all, but the communication really is not that great. And I didn't realize this. I assumed that because she was getting speech therapy in the school system, that it really wouldn't benefit us to have speech therapy outside. Again, I'm a newbie. And so we got another pediatrician, and she's like, no, most people get speech therapy in school, and they also get it outside of school. And so that was when I posted on Facebook, and I'm like, okay, is there a speech therapy locally that can help us? And that was when we got in contact with our current speech therapist. She's phenomenal, and I'm so grateful.
One thing I want to say really fast, just for any listener, but also for you to continue on your advocacy journey in your area, is that it is you do not need a provider's referral for your birth to 3
Yes.
program or your child find program, that school district program.
Yes.
So mamas, grandparents, caregivers, guardians, babysitters, anybody can make a referral to that birth to 3 program in any state, or that child find, or that school district program. So just make sure moving forward that anybody who's listening to this, if you're in kind of the same hold that Kara was, just make sure that you are aware you can bypass that pediatrician who's given you a stop sign. Bypass them.
Mhm.
And and then
Please.
go back to him after you're like, and we're in baby net.
Yes.
That's good to know. I
Absolutely.
didn't know that.
Yes.
That's really good to know.
Yes, you can self-refer.
Yeah.
And like I said, anybody can. So even if there's a grandparent, they can self-refer. Now mama obviously is going to have to be on board to get the services, but
Yeah.
you can at least do the initial questionnaire based on, your findings of the child.
hmm We
So,
also self-refer to our psychologist as well.
yes.
Yeah, because I would have, if I had waited on our new pediatrician, which they're fabulous so far, yeah, we would have still been on a waiting list. So I self-referred, because I asked around.
Great job. I know that, as moms, we're so good at beating ourselves up and all of the what ifs and all of this, but for as many red lights, like as a medical professional, somebody who I specialize in, I diagnose autism now, and I
Mhm.
work with all these parents very closely. And as obviously a mom of a son with level 3 autism, I want to tell you that, and I hope you really believe you did an excellent job because you came up with against a lot. And your daughter was not, it doesn't sound like, at least she was not frank autism, where it's like,
No,
you can kind of like walk by her in Target and know she has autism.
no,
She was kind of one of those where it's like, is it speech? Is it this? Like,
right.
and those are harder to catch. So not only you caught her very young for
hmm
as high functioning as it sounds like she is, but
hmm
also you advocated and pushed and you didn't take no for an answer. So
Yeah.
I would say like major great job, mama.
Give you all
Thank
your
you.
flowers.
Yes.
I
Ugh.
wanted to build off of a comment that you said previously in our conversation, was that you wish someone would have said something to you and like something was different with S, and that you would have liked someone to kind of hold your hand through that process. When you say someone, or can you clarify, are you talking about like if a family member would have noticed that there was a difference,
Oh
would
yeah.
you have taken that, received that information well, and been able, do you kind of think it would have put a light bulb off in your mind, like we need to do something here? Or are you referring more to the medical side since you did have so many stop signs with them?
Oh my gosh. I think it would have been just nice to have had medical. I would have had family, just anything. And I give my husband and my family members grace. Nobody wants to say that there's something wrong with your child. Um, and for those reasons, that was what I was wanting. Um, but really, because I have a lot of words and I talk a lot. I actually was still doing medical scribing, very, 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 very part time recently. And I spoke to one of the providers that I work with. She's a mom. And it just so happened, she's like, well, my friend, had a daughter that you're saying the same things. Like she elopes, she has no fear of danger, um, she's speech delayed in the meltdowns. And she was like, Kara, I think you should go and you should go and get someone to look at the situation. Like not your pediatrician. And someone that can, a psychologist. She's like, you, if there's nothing wrong, fine, and if there is, then there's obviously things you can do. So that was after a lot of conversation, and she had never met my daughter. She doesn't even know her. But just listening to what I had to say, it wasn't a diagnosis. It wasn't let's write down everything. No, she was just listening to what I had to say. And let me tell you, if you're a person that's supporting someone who is going through the process of diagnosing of autism, just listening. You don't have to give money. You don't have to give, you don't even, it's just listening.
For your advice.
Sorry, say that
Yeah.
again.
We're not asking for your advice at all.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We're asking for you to just say that our feelings are valid and
Yes.
that we are the mom and we know our child better than any expert. we know what we're going through. We know what is going on with our child. And we may not know the word, the diagnosis. That's for the expert, maybe.
Right.
But we know there is something different. And like I said, 99% of mamas out there, we're not wishing for that to be
Right.
the case.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, I think that is such a good tidbit is, anybody out there, whether it is grandparents or anything,
Yeah.
anybody who is like part of what Kelby and I like to call our village,
Yes.
like just listening to us sometimes and not saying it's going to be okay. It is what that's not what we want to hear in that moment. We're in a weak moment where we can't pick up that piece of Pop-Tart on the floor because we just can't.
Yes.
And because we've had a day that a lot of moms can't even understand.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we had an
So-
episode where a listener had asked a question similar to what your experience was if they had recognized that a family member close to them had very prominent signs of autism, and they didn't know if they should speak up and say something about it. And Dr. Tay, I apologize, I don't know the exact episode right now. I think it's 2 episodes ago, but if anybody hasn't listened to that one, it's a great episode. But she gave some good advice on there, which aligns with what you're saying as the mom right now, which was that you need to, and we're going to have also another plug is we're going to have Autism Out Loud, the Instagram with Mercedes on. She's going to be coming on in a future episode. But we use that terminology that to Autism Out Loud, don't be afraid of the word, and that just like your colleague did with you were just spoke and she just listened, but she did have somewhat of a little bit of a guidance there for you where she wasn't it sounds like she wasn't scared to be able to say like, hey mom, this might be something you want to look into, like look at a psychologist or a psychiatrist, something to circumnavigate that pediatrician that's giving you a stop sign. And so it's encouraging to kind of hear, not only do we have a listener question, we had Dr. Tay validate it, but then we have your experience to validate it also, that we do want some type of like, listen, validate us. But also, if you think that we just may not know what the next step is, it's okay to tell us like, hey, I think the next step would be this, and I'll walk with you. Go with me on that journey.
Yes.
I'm sure if that colleague, if you needed her to hold your hand further along that process, she would have, is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And I call it an organic village. It's not the built-in village that you get with your family. It's the organic village that comes along.
Yeah.
Erica is mine. She organically came into my life, and now she can never leave. So it's,
Likewise.
yeah, it's something that it's your chosen family, the people that you
Yeah.
choose to be in your life to support you. And it sounds like
Absolutely.
you thankfully had someone in your life that did that. So it's great. I love the full circle moment here that
Yeah.
we had that a question and then an answer and now an example of how it works.
It's great how that comes together, and it doesn't matter kind of what, I mean, on the spectrum you land, the process is still the same.
And like we've talked about this on previous episodes as well. Both of our sons are level 3 nonverbal. And so, for us, like I know at least my son is more of that frank autism.
Yeah.
If we're in Target, he just turned 4 on the 10th of this month. So he's still very young, but like if we're in Target and he's verbal simming, like if you know what you're listening to, the person next door in the next aisle knows that there's an autistic child next door.
Yeah.
And so, and for us, like we don't have to cross that red tape as much as sometimes as parents of higher functioning kiddos do. So like there's the struggle on our side that we kind of know of, like, we wish there were some skills, we pray for skills to keep acquiring.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, sometimes I think that navigation of making sure your kid still is getting recognized as this is still considered, I don't love the word, but it is what it is. It's a disability,
Right.
and it's still there, and it's still something that needs services. Just because they have more skills than a child with frank autism doesn't mean they don't need support. They need
Right.
support.
Yes.
And so that can be very, I think, almost more frustrating for a parent. I don't have that experience as a parent, but from what I see in my clinic, I would say I think sometimes those parents seem to be more frustrated with services versus the parents kind of more on my end of the spectrum tend to be just more scared
Mhm.
of what does the future look like.
Right. Yeah.
And that's just my perspective of what I've seen, but it's like you said, it doesn't matter where you fall. All of us parents need support. Our children still need support, and we're all in the group together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I was trying to think of some other things that was super helpful. But yeah, your comment about not needing referrals is huge. I think that was one of the things I think also held me back was I didn't and it's so funny because my sister-in-law, she was like, Kira, you realize that, he's not listening to you. And I've gone back to her several times. I'm like, Izzy, you're totally right. He was not listening to what I had to say. Um, and, uh, had a pediatrician that was willing just to listen to what I had to say, and, we could have definitely got the Babies Can't Wait program. So, that was one of the really super helpful things was to, self-refer. So, yeah, that was one of the things I wish I had known.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely, that is like one of my big goals is to reach as many medical offices as I can, and just because we even have some still just like in this local area, and they know they're on my list now. I've been doing my program long enough now, like they know who they are. When the patients transfer in, I'm like, make sure you let them know they're
They're
on
on
my
my
list.
list. Uh-oh.
So, try to be as, because it's not, they're doing nothing wrong. There's, I'm sure, excellent pediatricians in a lot of ways, brilliant. It's nothing it is old school mentality, and we don't live in that world anymore.
Yeah,
And we gotta upgrade our systems here. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
You had mentioned earlier too that you're looking at doing ABA therapy for your daughter. Where are you at in that process? Has she started yet, or is she on a wait list?
Yeah, so we've been on the waiting list since April, because that was when we got our unofficial diagnosis was in April, and then we got our official diagnosis in May. And so I had called, well, actually, our pediatrician, our newest one, put in an order for it. But, I've called them several times, and where are we at with that? And one of the benefits of having a child who's homeschooled is they have a lot more time for occupational speech and then ABA therapy. So so I told them, I'm like, oh well, we're homeschooling, so anytime. And they're like, oh, okay, well then you're lower down on the list. So this helps us out a lot. So you know, I know, and I never want to judge anybody this, and I think it's crazy that people get it kind of one way or the other about homeschooling and then versus going to a school system. Okay, so homeschooling is not for everybody, and public school system is not necessarily for everybody. So I'm totally a proponent for whatever works for anybody's family, because um, this life is a marathon; it's not a sprint. So um, we've had really good teachers, so far. They were very nice to us and helpful, and my daughter loved them. Our sped teacher, and I feel like God's calling me to homeschool my kids, even though she's neurodivergent. I also have my youngest daughter is neurotypical, and does not have any speech delays. And is thriving really well. And so far, I really like doing our little, lessons. Nothing's formal because, again, even in the state of Georgia, you don't have to submit any records until they're 6 years old. So we're just kind of like playing it cool and going to the library uh, and it was, I've met some people also on here that have even a higher level of autism that are homeschooling, and they're seeing a lot of gains just in social settings. I know one girl, Haley Carter, that I'm friends with. She, her daughter has autism as well. She's higher up on the level, higher level, and because she is homeschooled, her fight or flight is down and she's able to regulate better. She does have ARFID and is doing much better on eating and eating more food. So, there are some benefits, and so yeah, that's where I want to kind of do my stuff.
That's great.
I second that. We're on two ends of the on the schooling spectrum right now. We did preschool, but when we lived in Boston, he thrived in that integrative atmosphere. It was both neurotypical and atypical kiddos in the same classroom, and then they had ABA with all of their paras. They were RBTs. They just were much better resourced in that area. More funding floods into Massachusetts also for autism. But our heart was in South Carolina, so when we moved back, we decided that full-time, more intensive ABA therapy was the best setting for him at the moment. His behavior had upticked. And so we did that, and now, just like you, Kara, I feel like God's calling me to homeschool. And so we'll be starting that process next year. And our goal is to maybe one day integrate them back into the public school system or a school setting of some sort, maybe private, maybe in another way, a co-op. But I don't feel like he is quite ready yet to. He can't verbally advocate for himself. There's probably some hesitancy there from the mother standpoint too, of like sending him off, not being able to know what's happening there, and him telling me. But that is something that we're looking into. So I'll be calling you to get some insight into what program you're doing and all of that, because I have seen there's, just like you said, it you have to figure out what fits best for your child and your family, and if they're not ready yet, they're not ready yet. My son, knowing in a realistic point of view, sometimes it's hard for us to admit and say out loud, but Michael, my husband, and I have these conversations like, our son may live with us until we're no longer on this earth, and so what do we need to focus on? He doesn't need to know 2 + 2 = 4. He needs to know what safety is within the home, how to be self-preservative, how to be independent,
Make a sandwich.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so
Yes.
our homeschooling, although we understand that there's a requirement there for knowledge within that setting, with some things like 2 + 2 = 4,
Yeah.
we still want to focus more on life skills. Like, I take him to the grocery store with his AAC device. He communicates not only with me, but I have him communicate with the employees about things he needs. If he needs help getting something from a top shelf, I'm trying to getting him to request that with the device. And so it's those types of things that we're focusing on, and that will be our main focus with homeschooling. But not to say that the public school setting is not allowing a child to thrive if that is the setting for them. It's just my opinion, not for my kiddo just yet.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
And I also think, like from my family's perspective, we are very much a 2-income household, and we have 3 other children. Luca, our son who has autism, is our youngest. And I feel like our other 3 children's lives have been rocked a lot already by this diagnosis. And so it's one of those things where, we've struggled with, do I step back? I've already stepped back a lot with my work, but do I step back more? Do we move? Do we cut back our lifestyle so that one of us could homeschool? And the answer for our family at this point, our entire family, not just Luca, is no.
Yeah.
And so, while I see great benefits potentially to that, I think that, like, I want other families to know that, if you're in kind of a predicament like we are, even if it's something you want, you find the best second, plan B is what my husband likes to say. If plan A doesn't work, we go to plan B. If not, we go to plan C. And so we're doing plan B for us because I definitely see benefits of homeschooling and co-ops and things like that. But I just want to make sure other families know that if it's not the predicament, maybe you want to do a public school, you have such a voice in an IEP meeting, and make sure you use your voice, and you can get really like we have had excellent. We've only done preschool thus far, and we're in our second year with the same teacher who is God sent. I mean, we love her. We could not thank Miss Heather enough for everything she's done for our child and our family. But yeah, it's just so whether it's a choice or a like a lifestyle for the entire, all six of us in our situation, then, we have to just kind of like make sure that we're doing what's best for our entire family, and we can't change everything for one child.
Right.
And that's not healthy anyways for that child.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
So yeah, but I am very interested in the homeschool journey, because if our podcast ever really gets out of then we may just start our own co-op. So
Yeah, absolutely. There's one of the, if you're interested in doing homeschool and you want empowerment, even if your child has an IEP, my go-to lady, her name is Christy Faith. She's on TikTok, Instagram, maybe on Facebook, but she is fantastic. She once was a school teacher, but she specifically did college testing in her state. Anyways, I think COVID happened, and like everybody kind of everybody reevaluated a lot of different things. But she was like, okay, I can do this at home. And then she has a community called Thrive. Anyways, I'm not a part of it, but a lot of her videos and a lot of her stance is that just because your child has an IEP doesn't mean that that you can't do those services. Obviously, you're not an occupational therapist, you're not a speech therapist, you're not most people are not, but that you obviously are going to get those services outside of the home. But there's want to talk about IEPs, like you have a quiet home, you have one-on-one interventions, all these things that you're going to need that they put on the IEP, you can do at home and then get your other services outside the home, which is what we plan on doing.
That's good insight to that.
Yeah. I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, to kind of wrap things up, Kara, what we do to end the podcast is to ask our guests to tell us one thing that they think the world ought to know about autism. So we'd love to hear your insight into what that is before we kind of round out our conversation today.
So one thing that I think that the world should ought to know about autism is, if you're a mom that is questioning whether or not your child has autism, listen to your gut, listen to what you're actually seeing, and don't doubt yourself. You can waste a lot of time questioning. And as we've said before, there's so many resources, getting multiple opinions, and don't allow what your perception of autism is, because I can almost guarantee you, if you're new to this, that it's not true. It's so much deeper than what you can imagine. There's so much support. There's so much knowledge out there to help you manage the symptoms of autism.
Yeah, I think that's great. There's a saying that, like, you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism.
Absolutely.
And so, I think that's a really good point to make, is that, the symptoms that you're seeing, don't Google and like look at the top 5 symptoms of autism, because your child may have 0 of those.
Right. We did.
They may sit there and pick apart blocks all day long. It's still a restrictive, repetitive behavior, but it's not, taking a car wheel and spinning it at eye level, which is, one of those, or toe walking. My child never toe walked,
Right.
Up to this point.
Right.
So, he makes great eye contact, but he's still level 3 autism.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't just take those few and say, oh, well, it must not be that. They're wrong. Because there are so many different ways to sensory seek and
Yes.
have those restrictive behaviors. And your child is individualized, whether they are neurotypical or not. They are their own person and they will sensory seek their own way. So, yeah, I think that's a really good point.
My daughter, I did the Autism Speaks and I did the questionnaire, and they're like, oh, she doesn't have autism. And so please don't always go by Google search or a particular survey, because it's so much deeper than that. It is so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
Great advice.
Yeah.
We give you your flowers, Mama. Kudos to you for advocating and continuing to advocate for your daughter and just for the autism community. I know that you're very active on social media. So if you could kind of plug, if people want to follow along your journey, where can they find you so that they know how to reach you after this podcast?
Okay, so my Instagram handle is child voice advocate. I've changed my name a couple of times, but yeah, and I do basically just commentary, sort of our journey on what autism is, what it looks like for us. I'm still very new and somewhat still kind of raw, but yeah, I would love for anyone to follow and add to the commentary. Love that. I love hearing other people's opinions and everybody else's journey. I love that.
Well, we would love to probably have you back in I'd say around 6 to 9 months, so we can kind of check in with you, see where you're at on that homeschooling journey with ABA. Where fingers crossed, we're praying that that comes through for you very quickly, that she can get into a place that fits best for her. But we appreciate your time today, letting us connect with you, and you giving us some great nuggets of information and advice. So
thank you.
it was a pleasure to meet you.
Yes,
It's so nice to meet you.
We will see you all next week.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.